superstar everyone is arguing about. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is standing 2 wins away from another NBA Finals, but somehow, the loudest conversation in basketball is not about his greatness. It is not about the Oklahoma City Thunder's rise, their chemistry, their hunger, or the fact that they look like a team built to terrify the league for years. No, the entire NBA world is asking one brutal question. Is OKC winning because they are better, or because they have mastered the whistle? That is the part that has turned this story from a playoff run into a full-blown basketball war. Because on one side, you have SGA, a cold-blooded scorer with footwork so smooth it looks like he is moving half a second ahead of every defender. He gets to his spots, he controls pace, he lives in the mid-range. He can break down a defense without ever looking rushed. To his supporters, he is the perfect modern superstar. Efficient, calm, intelligent, and nearly impossible to guard without fouling. But on the other side, there is a growing crowd that sees something very different. They see the falls. They see the head snaps. They see the arms flying backward after light contact. They see defenders barely touching him before the whistle blows. And every time Shai hits the floor, the debate gets louder. This is no longer just fans complaining online. Former players, analysts, rival fan bases, media shows, and even people outside the sport have jumped into the fire. The nickname Flopper is being thrown around. OKC is being painted like the villain of the postseason. And somehow, the more people complain, the more the Thunder keep winning. That is what makes this so uncomfortable. If Shai were losing, people would laugh and move on. If OKC were falling apart, the jokes would disappear. But they are not. They are winning big games, while the basketball world argues about whether the way they are winning is beautiful, ugly, smart, or bad for the game. And now Shaquille O'Neal and the old school voices are standing in the middle of the storm, looking at SGA's style like it represents everything that changed about the NBA. So before this story gets even deeper, I want to know where you are watching from. Comment your city or country below. If you think SGA is just using the rules wisely, press 1. If you think this foul baiting style is hurting the game, press 2. And if you follow NBA stories like this, subscribe right now, because this controversy is only getting loud. When the evidence went viral, the controversy did not explode because one angry fan made a joke. It exploded because the clips started piling up, one after another, until the internet could no longer pretend this was just normal playoff contact. At first, it was a few possessions. Shai drove into the lane, leaned into a defender, hit the floor, and walked to the line. Then it happened again. Then another OKC player did it. Then another whistle came. Then another replay showed barely enough contact to move a jersey, but somehow enough to send a grown NBA superstar crashing backward like he had been hit by a truck. And once those moments became a compilation, the whole conversation changed. Because a single play can be argued. A single fall can be explained. A single bad call can be blamed on the referee. But when fans watch 2 full minutes of Thunder players falling, flailing, snapping their heads back, and selling contact from every possible angle, it stopped feeling like an accident. It started looking like a system. That was the moment OKC's image shifted. They were no longer just the young, fearless team with a superstar guard and a championship-level roster. They became the team that many fans believed had found the soft spot in the NBA rulebook. Get downhill, invite contact, exaggerate the hit, trust the whistle, walk to the line, reset the defense, repeat until the opponent loses rhythm, patience, and maybe even their best defender to foul trouble. The most damaging part was not even the jokes. It was the number. When reports started showing how often SGA was ending up on the floor compared to other stars, the criticism became harder to dismiss. Fans looked at players like Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, and even bigger names around the league, then looked back at Shai's fall rate and saw a gap that felt impossible to ignore. And that is why the nickname stuck so fast. Flop City was not just an insult anymore. It became a label, a brand, a way for rival fans to explain why they felt robbed, annoyed, or exhausted every time the Thunder played. Every whistle became suspicious. Every fall became evidence. Every free throw became another reason for the internet to reload the argument. But here is the twist that made everything even worse for the rest of the league. While people were complaining, Oklahoma City was not collapsing. They were not apologizing. They were not changing. They were winning. And that is what made the outrage burn hotter. Because nothing frustrates fans more than watching something they hate become effective. Shaq, the old guard, and the war over basketball's soul. To understand why this controversy became so personal, you have to understand what Shaquille O'Neal represents. Shaq was not just another retired superstar with a microphone. He was the symbol of a different NBA, a louder NBA, a more physical NBA. An era where big men absorbed contact, guards got knocked down for real, and nobody expected the referee to rescue them on every possession. Shaq did not build his legacy by hunting soft whistles. He built it by overpowering defenders so badly that teams had to foul him on purpose just to survive. That is why the Shai conversation hits differently when it comes from voices like his. Because to the old guard, SGA's game can look like the exact opposite of what they were raised to respect. They see a player who is brilliant, yes, but also a player who understands how to turn the smallest bump into 2 free throws. They see the modern NBA rewarding movement that looks less like surviving contact and more like performing it, and that is where the generational fight begins. For younger fans, this is simply basketball intelligence. The rules are the rules. If a defender reaches, if he leans, if he is out of position, a smart scorer punishes him. Shai is not cheating by understanding angles, timing, body control, and referee tendencies. He is doing what every elite player has done in some form, finding an advantage. But for older fans, that answer does not feel good enough. They remember Michael Jordan finishing through hits. They remember Kobe Bryant taking contact and still trying to make the shot. They remember Allen Iverson getting knocked down and popping back up without turning every possession into a courtroom drama. To them, there is a difference between drawing a foul and selling a foul. There is a difference between toughness and theater. And SGA is now standing directly on that line. That is why Shaq's presence matters so much. He gives the criticism a face. He turns the complaint into a cultural argument. This is no longer just about whether one call was right or wrong. It is about what fans want basketball to be. Should the NBA reward skillful manipulation of the rules? Or should it protect the rhythm, flow, and physicality that made older generations fall in love with the game? The uncomfortable truth is that both sides have a point. Shai is playing within the system. But the system is exactly what people are angry about. The crowd turned the court into a trial. The Western Conference Finals gave this controversy the stage it needed. It was no longer just clips on social media, numbers on a graphic, or analysts arguing from a studio desk. Now, it was happening in front of a packed arena, under playoff lights, with every possession feeling like evidence in a case the basketball world had already started judging. And San Antonio fans did not wait quietly. Every time Shai Gilgeous-Alexander touched the ball, the building felt ready to explode. The boos came first, then the chants. Then the word that followed him around the series like a shadow: flopper. It did not matter whether he was driving, shooting, standing still, or simply holding the ball near the top of the key. The crowd had made up its mind. They were not watching a superstar anymore. They were watching a suspect. That is what made the atmosphere so tense. For the Spurs, every whistle felt like punishment. Their defenders tried to stay vertical. They tried to give Shai space to land. They tried to avoid reaching. But when the call still came, you could see the frustration in their body language. Hands went up. Heads turned toward the officials. Players looked at the replay board like they were hoping the entire arena would see what they saw. And many times, the replay only made the anger worse. A light bump became 2 free throws. A defender sliding his feet became a foul. A mid-range jumper with minimal contact became another trip to the line. For OKC, it was smart playoff basketball. For San Antonio, it felt like being trapped in a game where the rules changed every time Shai fell. But the most dangerous part for the Thunder was that the criticism started spreading beyond SGA. It was not just Shai anymore. Fans began pointing at other OKC players, saying the entire team had adopted the same approach: sell contact, fall hard, force the official to make a decision, turn rhythm into interruption, turn defense into hesitation. And once a team gets that reputation, every whistle becomes controversial, even the correct ones. That is how a basketball game becomes a trial. The crowd becomes the jury. The broadcast becomes the evidence room. Social media becomes the sentencing chamber. And every fall, every replay, every free throw becomes another argument about whether OKC is a brilliant young team or the NBA's most frustrating villain. Yet through all of it, Shai stayed cold. He did not look shaken by the chants. He did not change his pace. He did not stop attacking. He knew opposing fans were supposed to hate him. He knew the noise came with winning. And every time the crowd got louder, the Thunder kept doing the one thing that made everybody even angrier. They kept winning. The plays that made OKC look guilty. The problem for Oklahoma City was that the criticism was no longer built on feelings. It was built on moments people could pause, replay, zoom in on, and argue about for hours. One possession in the Spurs series became the perfect example. Shai caught the ball near the wing with a defender close enough to bother him, but not close enough to knock him down. He gathered, created a small pocket of space, and rose into his shot. The defender tried to avoid his body. The contact looked light, maybe even harmless. But then Shai hit the floor. The whistle came, and the entire building reacted like it had just seen the same movie again. That was the pattern that drove people crazy. It was not that every call was fake. It was not that SGA never got fouled. Great scorers get hit because defenders are desperate. But the issue was how often the contact looked smaller than the reaction. A hand near the hip became a full body fall. A brush on the arm became a dramatic landing. A defender trying to stay disciplined still ended up watching Shai walk to the line. And once fans believed they understood the trick, they started seeing it everywhere. Jalen Williams drew criticism too. Other Thunder players were accused of leaning into contact, throwing themselves backward, and turning ordinary playoff defense into whistles. That is when the narrative became even more damaging. Because if it was only Shai, people could call it a superstar habit. But if the whole team was doing it, then critics could call it an identity. That word matters. Identity is harder to shake than a bad call. A bad call disappears after the next game. An identity follows you into every arena. It changes how fans see your wins. It changes how opponents defend you. It changes how broadcasts describe you. Suddenly, OKC was not just young, skilled, and fearless. They were young, skilled, fearless, and suspicious. But here is what made the whole thing almost impossible to stop. The strategy worked. Defenders became cautious. They stopped playing freely. They worried about every reach, every closeout, every bump. And when a defender starts thinking more about the referee than the scorer in front of him, the scorer has already won. That is the genius and the ugliness of it. Shai did not need everyone to agree with his style. He only needed the defense to hesitate for half a second. He only needed one official to see enough contact. He only needed 2 free throws, 1 foul added to the box score, and 1 more frustrated opponent losing control of the moment. So while the critics collected clips, OKC collected wins. And that is why this debate became so explosive. Because the evidence made the Thunder look guilty to a lot of people, but the scoreboard made them look unstoppable. When the drama left the court, then the story crossed the line that nobody expected. This was no longer just a basketball argument. It was no longer just fans booing inside an arena, analysts arguing on television, or slow motion clips spreading across social media. The SGA controversy had become so loud, so ridiculous, and so marketable that it turned into something almost unbelievable. A board game. That is when everyone realized this had become bigger than the Western Conference Final. The game was built around the joke that every time Shai Gilgeous-Alexander got touched, the buzzer went off. It was not subtle. It was not polite. It was not trying to hide the message. The entire concept was a public parody of the biggest criticism attached to Shai's name. Touch him, he falls, the whistle blows. For NBA fans, it was comedy. For OKC supporters, it was disrespect. For Shai's camp, it was something far more serious. But the wildest part was not even the game itself. The wildest part was who helped promote it. Dillon Brooks. That name changed the temperature instantly. Brooks was not just some random player looking for attention. He was Shai's fellow Canadian, his national team teammate, a player connected to him beyond the NBA schedule. And suddenly, there he was, involved in a promotion that turned SGA's most hated reputation into a public punchline. That is the kind of detail that makes a sports story explode. Because now fans were not just asking whether Shai flopped. They were asking whether Dillon Brooks had crossed a personal line. Was it just marketing? Was it just trolling? Was it harmless comedy? Or was it a betrayal wrapped inside a joke? The internet did what it always does. It picked sides immediately. Some people laughed and called it genius. Others said it was embarrassing and disrespectful. OKC fans saw it as another example of the league refusing to respect their superstar. Rival fans saw it as proof that even people close to the NBA understood how ridiculous the whistle situation had become. And that is what made the board game so damaging. It took a basketball criticism and made it physical. Something you could hold, something you could ship, something you could post, sell, promote, and laugh about. A meme disappears after a day. A viral clip gets replaced by the next highlight. But a product built around your reputation, that sticks. For SGA, the message was clear. The conversation was no longer under his control. He could ignore the chants, he could ignore the boos, he could ignore a few angry fans online, but once his name, image, and reputation became part of a public joke outside the game itself, the controversy had officially entered dangerous territory. And that set up the next explosion, because Shai's side was not going to stay silent forever. The legal letter that changed the narrative. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had said the noise did not bother him. That was his public position. Cold, calm, unshaken. He told everyone he expected opposing fans to hate him. He understood the chants. He understood the boos. He understood that winning in someone else's building comes with anger, pressure, and noise. To Shai, that was simply part of the show. But then the board game showed up, and suddenly the story changed. Because when SGA's legal team reportedly stepped in, The entire internet saw blood in the water. The message from his side was simple. This was not just trash talk anymore. This was not just a fan chant. This was not just a joke on a broadcast. This was a company using his name, image, likeness, and public reputation to promote a product built around mocking him. From their point of view, the line had been crossed. Basketball criticism was one thing. Commercial parody was another, but fans did not all see it that way. To critics, the legal response felt like the worst possible move. They said Shai could not claim the noise meant nothing, then have his people fire off a serious letter over a joke. They argued that if he was truly above the criticism, he should have let the board game disappear on its own. Instead, the response made the joke even bigger. That is the danger of trying to fight a meme. Sometimes, the harder you swing at it, the stronger it gets. Within hours, the conversation was no longer just about whether SGA flopped. It became about whether he was sensitive, whether his camp overreacted, whether a superstar chasing another finals run should care about a parody product in the middle of the playoffs. The critics had found a new angle, and they attacked it immediately. The irony was brutal. On the court, Shai looked untouchable. He played with patience. He did not scream at officials every possession. He did not lose control. He did not act like a player mentally falling apart. But off the court, the legal response gave people a reason to question whether the criticism had hit deeper than he admitted. And that is where the story became even more complicated. Because both sides had a fair argument. Shai had every reason to protect his image. No superstar wants his name turned into a product without permission. But the public does not always care about legal logic. The public cares about optics, and the optics were messy. A superstar accused of selling contact was now being mocked by a board game. His own friend had helped promote it. His team responded legally. The company refused to quietly disappear, and the internet turned the whole thing into a second trial, this time away from the hardwood. That was the moment the controversy stopped being about whistles alone. It became about reputation, the defense that Shai's critics did not want to hear. But not everyone was ready to throw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander into the villain role. In fact, some of the strongest voices in basketball pushed back hard against the outrage. They were not saying every fall looked good. They were not saying every whistle was perfect. They were saying something much more uncomfortable for the critics. If you are angry, maybe you are angry at the wrong person. That was the argument from Reggie Miller. And coming from Reggie, it mattered. Because Miller understood better than almost anyone what it means to irritate defenders, manipulate space, and live inside the thin line between skill and annoyance. He spent his career using screens, angles, pump fakes, and body control to punish anyone who got too close. So when people attacked SGA for knowing how to draw contact, Miller saw a familiar story. His point was simple. Shai is not the referee. He is not blowing the whistle for himself. His job is to play basketball, attack weaknesses, and use every legal advantage available. If defenders keep reaching, if officials keep calling fouls, if the rules keep rewarding his movements, then why would he stop? That question is harder to answer than critics want to admit, because the NBA has always been a league of adaptation. Players find edges, coaches build systems around those edges, defenses adjust, officials react. Then the league changes rules when something becomes too extreme. That is not new. That is basketball history. Richard Jefferson made a similar point from another angle. He argued that narratives do not win championships. Free throw jokes do not erase buckets. Chants do not erase MVP level production. And if you removed every free throw from Shai's game, he would still be one of the most dangerous scorers alive. That is the part many fans ignore. SGA is not some average player hiding behind the whistle. He can get to the rim, he can hit the mid-range, he can control tempo, he can close games. The free throws make him more frustrating, but they are not the only reason he is elite. That is why the criticism becomes tricky. You can dislike the style without pretending the player is not special. Raymond Felton added another layer by bringing up James Harden. For years, Harden was attacked for a similar style, but he was also praised as one of the most unstoppable offensive engines the league had ever seen. The same fans who hated the whistle still feared the production, and that is where Shai lives now. Some people see manipulation, others see mastery, some see theater, others see intelligence, but everyone sees the same result. Points on the board, fouls on defenders, and Oklahoma City moving closer to the finals. So the defense of Shai is not that the criticism is completely fake. The defense is that basketball has always rewarded players smart enough to bend the game without breaking the rules. The uncomfortable truth about Shai's greatness. Here is the part that makes this entire debate so difficult. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not easy to dismiss. If he were an average player living off cheap whistles, the NBA world would have already moved on. Fans would mock him, defenses would adjust, and the story would fade. But that is not what is happening. Shai is still scoring, still controlling games, still forcing elite defenders to look helpless, still carrying himself like a superstar who knows exactly how dangerous he is. That is why the criticism has become so intense. People are not just angry because he falls. They are angry because the falling works on top of everything else he already does well. He does not need the whistle to be great, but when he gets it, he becomes almost impossible to deal with. That is the nightmare for opponents. You guard him too soft, he walks into the mid-range. You press him too hard, he slips past you. You reach, he punishes you. You stay vertical, he still finds a way to create contact and make the official decide. That is not luck. That is control. And control is what separates great scorers from ordinary ones. Shai plays at his own rhythm. He does not rush because the crowd is loud. He does not panic because defenders get physical. He does not abandon his spots because people online are calling him names. He keeps bending the game toward his pace until everyone else is reacting to him. That is why OKC can survive the noise. The Thunder are not just a one-man controversy. They are deep, young, disciplined, and dangerous. They defend. They run, they space the floor, they have players who understand their roles. And when games get tight, they have a superstar who can slow everything down and turn one possession into a problem the defense cannot solve. Still, reputation matters. Championship teams are remembered not only for winning, but for how they made people feel while they won. Some teams are loved, some are feared, some are respected, some are hated until history softens the edges. Right now, OKC is walking into that dangerous space where greatness and resentment live together. If they lose, critics will say the basketball gods finally answered. If they win, critics will say the league rewarded the wrong style. But either way, Shai's name is already locked into one of the biggest conversations in modern basketball. He is not just being judged as a player anymore. He is being judged as a symbol of where the NBA is going. And that might be the heaviest pressure of all, the lesson behind the noise. In the end, this story is not only about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander falling to the floor. It is not only about Shaq shaking his head, fans chanting flopper, a parody board game, or the internet turning every whistle into a national debate. Those are the loud parts. Those are the clips people share. But underneath all of that noise is a bigger question the NBA cannot avoid anymore. What kind of basketball does the league want to run? Because Shai did not create this system by himself. He studied it. He mastered it. He found the soft spaces in the rules, the timing of the whistle, the fear inside defenders, and the pressure officials feel in playoff moments. That may frustrate people, but it also proves something uncomfortable. The smartest players do not just beat defenders. They beat habits. They beat angles. They beat expectations. They beat the game within the game. Still, winning that way comes with a cost. If a superstar becomes too closely tied to foul hunting, people may respect the numbers but question the feeling. They may acknowledge the MVPs but debate the method. They may see the trophies but still wonder whether the journey looked like basketball or strategy pushed to its most annoying limit. That is the reputation battle Shai now faces. For OKC, the lesson is just as important. Great teams do not only need talent, they need identity. And when the whole league starts calling your identity unfair, ugly, or difficult to watch, you have to decide whether to ignore it, adjust it, or embrace the villain role completely. The Thunder may be young, but they are already learning what every hated contender learns. Once you start winning, people stop giving you the benefit of the doubt. For the old guard, there is a lesson too. The game changes whether legends like it or not. Every era believes its basketball was tougher, purer, and more honest. But every era also had its own tricks, loopholes, and advantages. The truth is not that the past was perfect and the present is broken. The truth is that basketball keeps evolving, and every generation has to decide what parts of that evolution are skill and what parts have gone too far. That is why this debate will not disappear. Shai is too good, OKC is too successful, Shaq's voice is too powerful, fans are too divided, and the NBA's rules are too important to ignore. So whether people love him or hate him, SGA has forced the basketball world to look in the mirror. Maybe he is a genius, maybe he is exploiting the whistle, maybe he is both. But one thing is undeniable. While everyone argues, Oklahoma City keeps moving forward. And that may be the most painful truth for the critics. The jokes are loud, the boos are loud, the old school complaints are loud, but wins are louder, championships are louder, history is louder. So the real challenge for Shai is not just to win. It is to win in a way that outlasts the criticism. To prove that behind the whistles, behind the falls, behind the memes, there is still a player great enough to define an era. And for the fans, maybe the lesson is simple. Debate hard, but keep it fair. Criticize the style, but do not forget the human being. Basketball is better when the arguments are passionate, not hateful. The game can evolve without losing respect. Rivalries can burn without becoming personal. Now, I want to hear from you. If you believe Shai is simply using the rules better than everyone else, comment 1. If you believe this style is damaging the NBA, comment 2. If you think both things can be true at the same time, comment 3. Like this video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe to the channel for more deep NBA stories, because the next controversy may already be waiting in the next whistle.